Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstasy, is known by many names, each reflecting a different aspect of his powerful nature. Today, we explore who he really is and the profound influence he had in ancient Greece. Dionysus, the wine god, in one of his aspects is a nature god, a deity who comes and goes with the seasons like Demeter and Persephone. He symbolizes the cycles of growth, decay, and rebirth. He was not a full-grown god, but a baby in his cradle. Dionysus was often represented in ritual as slain and dismembered, and there was a resurrection of the god, a new birth as a little child. Dionysian worship traces some of its origins to the Orphic Theogony. In the Orphic Theogony, there is a family tree beginning from the primordial gods leading up to Dionysus. A pivotal part of this lineage is the union of Uranus and Gaia. From Uranus and Gaia sprang the three Moirai, or Fates, the 300-handed ones, and the three Cyclops. These latter were cast by Uranus into Tartarus, fearing they would rob him of his power. In revenge for this maltreatment of her sons, Gaia produced the 14 Titans, 7 male and 7 female. 6 of the Titans, led by Cronus, the strongest of them all, plotted against Uranus. They castrated him and took away his power. Cronus took control and made Olympus his home. The reign of Cronus was a period of tranquility and happiness, as well as of extraordinary longevity and vigor. Cronus and Rhea gave birth to Zeus and his brothers and sisters. Fearing that he might lose his throne, Cronus swallowed all his children, but Zeus was concealed in the cave of Nyx, the goddess of the night. Along with Rhea and Adrasteia, who nursed and protected him, and the armed dance and instruments of the Corybantes that kept Cronus from hearing him cry, Zeus grew up in secret. When Zeus came of age, he set a trap for his father. He intoxicated Cronus with honey, and while Cronus slept deeply, Zeus castrated him and took his power. Rising to supreme power, Zeus swallowed all the pre-existing elements, then created everything anew from himself, following his own divine plans. So many gods and goddesses sprang from Zeus, but one new god, a latecomer, stands out prominently in the Orphic Theogony. Zagreus, the horned Zagreus child, is the son of Zeus and his daughter Persephone. He is Zeus's favorite and the child full of promise, destined to rule and wield the thunderbolt if he grows up. As an infant, he sits on the throne next to Zeus, guarded by Apollo and the Corybantes. But Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, ruins his future and convinces the Titans to go against him. They cover their faces with plaster, approach him on the throne, distract him with toys and kill him with a sword while he looks at his reflection in a mirror. They then cut up his body and boil it in a cauldron, leaving only the heart, which is picked up by Athena and carried to Zeus. In his wrath, Zeus strikes down the Titans with thunder, sending them into Tartarus, where they are turned into ashes. Apollo is directed to collect the remains of Zagreus and bury them at the foot of Mount Parnassus. The heart is given to Semele, and Zagreus is born again from her under the form of Dionysus. Despite their destruction, the divine essence of Dionysus remained in the ashes of the Titans, and from these ashes humans were created. The Dionysian cult, originating in Thrace and likely influenced by neighboring regions like Phrygia, was initially wild and untamed. As it spread southward into Greece and beyond, it encountered more refined cultural centers like Athens, where it evolved into a more artistic and structured form, giving rise to significant aspects of Greek drama and art. Over time, Dionysus became a widely venerated god whose worship could adapt to diverse traditions. Dionysus was often depicted being carried on a chariot, sometimes by exotic animals like lions, as his worshippers spread his call to new regions. He traveled with a joyous and chaotic procession accompanied by Maenads, ecstatic female followers, and satyrs, wild goat-like creatures. Satyrs and Maenads are considered mythical figures, but historical evidence shows that they did indeed exist. The reason for their mythical features lies in the Greek tendency towards anthropomorphism. Over time, the primitive worshippers of Dionysus, who were initially only wild people, gradually took on traits associated with animal-like figures in Greek mythology. While the centaurs, half-horse, half-human beings already existed in Greek tradition, satyrs who were part of the Dionysian retinue adopted a more human-like forms with animal traits, including some horse-like features. Eventually, their depiction evolved from horse-like figures to the more common goat-like appearance. Interestingly, in Greek, tragedy was referred to as the goat song, which ties the Dionysian worship and the image of the goat to the origins of this dramatic form. The female worshippers of Dionysus had different names, like the Meneids and the Thyiads. Meneid is now a proper name, a fixed and crystallized personality, so is Thyad, but in the beginning it was not so. These names were adjectives rather than proper names, but at the core they all express the same idea: women possessed by the spirit of Dionysus. Meneids, the more mythological form of these worshippers, do not belong to any specific race. They are possessed, maddened, or as the ancients would say, inspired by the spirit of their god. Thyiads, however, are the more historical figures who over time became more mythologized and in some instances evolved into what we now think of as the Meneids in mythological accounts. The Thyiads were women from Athens who traveled every other year with women from Delphi to Mount Parnassus, where they held wild celebrations in honor of Dionysus. There's a story that says a man named Castalius lived on Mount Parnassus and had a daughter named Thya, who was the first priestess of Dionysus. She led these wild rituals, and because of her, all women who became frenzied in honor of Dionysus were called Thyiads. These celebrations were held differently in each region. Some were more zealous and some were tamer. In civilized regions, the intoxication came from art, from music, not from drinking excessive wine. But in its more excessive forms, the intoxicated women would daub their faces with white clay. There were savage sacrifices where they would tear a fawn or a child into pieces and eat the raw flesh. Tame serpents would creep out and twine themselves around these women. All these acts somehow reenacted the incident in which the Titans tore Zagreus into pieces and were consequently punished by being turned into ashes. The Macedonian men were terrified by these rites. Though they disliked these celebrations, they were too afraid to stop them. To them, the women were possessed, magical, and dangerous to handle. Athenian men, however, sought the counsel of Epimenides, who was skilled in religious rites. He was called upon to reform unsettling Dionysian rituals. He simplified religious ceremonies, removing cruel elements and making them more orderly and acceptable. Among these regulations was that they couldn't go out at night except in a carriage and with a light before them. Delphi, along with Athens, played an important role in making the wild Thracian worship more acceptable and suited to Greek society, which helped the new religion become more popular in Greece. In our discussion of Dionysus and his influence on ancient Greece, we've explored his worship and the powerful impact it had on the culture. In the next video, we'll dive into how this very same religion sparked the birth of drama, laying the foundation for one of the most significant contributions to the arts in the Western history.